Pretending to be the boss's fiancée, the ordinary secretary stunned the wealthy CEO when she walked in like a goddess. Hello everyone. Before we start today's story, I have a small request. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos on our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The office of Hayes Corporation had thinned out as dusk settled across the glass towers. Most lights were dimmed, corridors silent, and only one person remained at her desk, typing with small, precise motions that made barely a sound. Rosie Bennett, quiet, modest, forgettable to anyone who didn't look closely. Her beige cardigan, cotton skirt, and loosely tied ponytail blended into the background like she was part of the furniture. She preferred it that way. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no trouble. Invisible meant she could finish her work, collect her paycheck, and send every spare cent to the hospital where her mother waited for surgery. A sharp voice shattered the stillness. Miss Bennett. My office. Now. Rosie froze mid-keystroke. Darius Hayes, cold, immaculate, the kind of powerful that made the world adjust itself around him, stood in his doorway. His expression was carved from ice. She walked in carefully, hands clasped. Yes, sir. He didn't bother sitting. The clients expect my fiancée tonight. His tone was flat, businesslike, as if discussing a scheduling error rather than human dignity. The real one's out of the country. Then he looked at her, one quick, assessing sweep. You'll do. The words struck like a slap, even though his voice remained calm. Rosie swallowed hard, keeping her face neutral. She knew she was playing. People had been reminding her all her life, but hearing it framed as a convenient replacement cut deeper than she expected. I don't think I'm the right. You need the year-end bonus, don't you? He interrupted, not cruelly, just stating a fact he'd already calculated. This dinner secures a deal worth $200 million. You attend, play along, and your bonus is guaranteed. Her breath tightened. That money. It meant the difference between her mother receiving surgery this month or being pushed onto another endless waiting list. For a second, she considered refusing. She wanted to. She wanted to say she wasn't a prop he could move around. But the image of her mother's tired smile rose in her mind, soft and tired from years of fighting illness. Rosie steadied her voice. When do we leave? 2 hours. Dress appropriately, Darius said, already turning away. I'll have a car sent for you. She nodded, stepping out of the office with the same quiet composure she always carried. But inside, something ached, sharp, humiliating, unavoidable. The elevator doors closed around her, and her reflection stared back, a plain girl in a dim office building, used because she blended in and wouldn't be missed. Rosie exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. Just one night, she told herself. Endure it. Get the money. Save Mom. Outside the windows, the city lights glowed like fire, bright, distant, unreachable. And Rosie walked out into the evening, unaware that tonight would be the last time anyone ever called her invisible. Rosie stepped out of the Hayes Tower and into the cold night air as if escaping the weight of the entire building. The city lights blurred around her. She wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion or the sting behind her eyes. Pretending to be Darius Hayes' fiancée, she could barely wrap her mind around it. A taxi pulled up, and she slid inside, curling her hands together on her lap. She had always known she didn't belong in the marble, glass, and polished world of Darius Hayes, but tonight that truth pressed against her chest like a stone. As the taxi rattled toward her apartment, Rosie typed a message to Emma. He said I'll do. Like a placeholder. Like I'm furniture. Emma replied instantly. I'm coming over. Don't move. By the time Rosie pushed open the door to her small apartment, Emma had already let herself in. Arms crossed, expression unimpressed. So, Emma said, Mr. Towering Iceberg wants you to be his fiancée for a night. Rosie dropped her bag on the couch. He doesn't even see me, Em. I'm just the plain secretary who organizes his schedule and makes sure his coffee is the right temperature. I don't belong at some fancy dinner. She tugged at her loose blouse. Look at me. Emma stepped forward, tilting Rosie's chin up. Rosie Bennett, she said with a seriousness that felt like a slap and a hug at the same time. If he is going to use you as decoration, you might as well look like art. Rosie blinked. I don't own anything even close to art. That, Emma declared, is where I come in." She darted to Rosie's bedroom closet, rummaging like a storm until she pulled out a long garment bag. From inside, she revealed a deep crimson evening gown, smooth satin, subtle shimmer, neckline soft but elegant. Rosie stared. "Emma, that dress is perfect," Emma finished. "And it will fit you like it was made for you." Rosie hesitated, brushing a fingertip along the fabric. The color was bold, alive, everything she wasn't. Emma didn't give her time to doubt. "Try it on." Minutes later, Rosie stepped out of the bedroom, breath held. The dress hugged her waist, skimmed the floor, and made her skin glow in a way she had never seen before. But it was Emma's reaction that startled her most. Her friend actually went silent. Then Emma grinned slowly. "Told you. Not plain, just hidden." Rosie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's the dress." "No," Emma corrected gently, pulling a chair to sit Rosie down. "This is you." She swept Rosie's hair into a soft, loose style, simple but graceful. A touch of blush, a faint highlight on the cheekbones, a whisper of mascara. And finally, a red lip, muted but confident. Rosie looked at her reflection. She hardly recognized herself, yet something inside her settled, as if this version had always been waiting. Emma placed both hands on her shoulders. "There. Now breathe. You're ready." Rosie inhaled, slow and steady. She didn't know what the evening would bring, nor did she care right now. All she felt in this moment was the quiet, steady truth reflected back at her. She was not invisible. Not tonight. The town car idled at the curb, its headlights cutting through the early evening haze. When Rosie stepped outside her small apartment building, the driver in a dark suit immediately rushed to open the back door for her. She hesitated for a heartbeat, fingers tightening around the small clutch Emma had insisted she carry. This wasn't her world. Polished cars, velvet seats, and silent chauffeurs. But tonight, she had no choice except to walk straight into it. The ride to the Grand Meridian Hotel felt unreal, as if she were slipping into someone else's life. Every streetlight reflected off the window beside her, carving soft shapes across her red gown. She exhaled slowly, remembering Emma's words, "Look like art." By the time the car reached the towering hotel entrance, Rosie's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She stepped out, gathering the hem of the gown as she walked through the golden-lit lobby. Inside the private dining hall, Darius was standing near the head of the long table, flipping through the evening's contract folder. He didn't look up at first. He seemed composed, unreadable, just as he always did at the office. But when the soft echo of Rosie's heels reached his ears, he raised his head and froze. His eyes widened, the practiced stillness of his face cracking open with something like disbelief. He had expected the quiet, invisible secretary. Instead, the woman before him looked like she had stepped out of a dream he did not know he had. Rosie swallowed, unsure what to do with the weight of his stare. The clients were already seated, murmuring in admiration. She settled into the chair beside Darius, trying not to let her hands tremble. At first, her voice was stiff, her responses careful. But as conversations shifted to business, she found herself speaking with quiet clarity, something she never did at the office. When champagne was brought out, one of the clients joked about how many late-night meetings she must have attended with Darius. Rosie allowed herself a small smile. Those meetings did not include champagne. Darius turned his head sharply toward her, surprise flickering across his eyes, genuine and unguarded. The clients laughed, clearly charmed. When a lull settled at the table, Rosie finally whispered, "Why me? Why did you choose me for this?" Darius didn't look at her at first. He kept his gaze trained forward, voice calm, but low enough for only her to hear. "Because they do not listen. You do." Then, as the waiters presented the main course, Darius introduced her smoothly as his fiancée, as if the lie were the most natural thing in the world. Under the table, his hand brushed hers. When she stiffened, he gently wrapped his fingers around hers, a quiet, steadying gesture. And as the evening unfolded, Rosie realized she wasn't playing invisible anymore. For the first time, she let herself be seen. Morning light filtered through the high windows of Hayes Tower, pale and cold, as Rosie entered the executive office. The echoes of last night, the warmth of Darius's hand under the dining table, the way he looked at her as if meeting her for the first time, still lingered in her chest. But the office atmosphere was different. distant, professional, almost cold. Darius was already sitting at his desk, his posture straight, his eyes glued to the bright screen. He didn't look up when she entered. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," Rosie said softly. She waited for a response. It came a few seconds late. "This will continue," he said, his voice flat, almost cold. "Customers are quite satisfied. You'll be attending more dinners, more meetings." The words should have sounded calm, but something inside her tightened. She nodded, keeping her expression calm. "Yes, sir." He glanced at her one last time, quick, searching, almost unreadable, before turning back to his laptop. They had barely spoken all morning, and Rosie tried to concentrate on her report instead of rehashing the night before. By noon, her wrists were starting to ache from typing. She rubbed them gently, hoping the discomfort would pass. But Darius was up before she realized he was looking at her. Without a word, he crossed the room, opened a drawer, and placed a soft beige wrist pad next to her keyboard. "You're overworked," he said, his voice softer than his expression. "Put this on." Rosie blinked in surprise. "I thank you." He hesitated for a moment, as if considering what else to say. But then he just nodded and headed back to his office. That night, she works overtime, and while she was making another cup of coffee to stay awake, Darius appeared beside her. "One more cup for me. I'll stay to finish the Q4 forecast," he said. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It was something else, something quiet, almost caring. They worked side by side for hours. At times, Darius leaned over to look at her screen, reviewing the charts she'd adjusted. "That's good," he murmured. "Very good, actually." He paused for a moment, then added softly, "I used to think people like you didn't exist anymore. Loyal, quiet, honest." The words were quiet, warm, and unexpected. That weekend, they attended a charity gala together. Rosie wore a simple silver dress. Darius wore a classic black tuxedo. Cameras flashed, chandeliers flickered, but Rosie remained calm and graceful. When Richard Moore, Darius's longtime rival, approached with a smirk, Rosie greeted him with steely politeness, brushing aside his subtle sarcasm, turning the conversation sharply and clearly. Darius looked at her, both impressed and protective. "Thank you," he said afterward. "You handled him better than anyone on my team." They stepped out onto the quiet balcony, away from the crowds. Snow drifted gently under the city lights. Darius looked at her, as if he were seeing her through a new lens. "You're special tonight." The morning began with an unnatural silence inside Hayes Tower. The hum of printers, phones, and distant conversations had disappeared, replaced by an eerie, wall-to-wall silence like a storm brewing. Rosie felt it the moment she stepped out of the elevator. People's eyes turned to her, quickly, sharply, before quickly looking away, as if at her burn. She didn't know why. Not yet. When she reached her desk, the reason was there, bold, ruthless, and impossible to ignore. A headline flashed across the lobby's large screen. Hayes engaged to his secretary. Corporate Cinderella or scandal in disguise. Below was a photo. Darius leaned in, his hand on Rosie's back, their faces inches apart under the golden chandelier. She stopped breathing. At the same time, Darius stood in the conference room, facing a wall of opposition. "Your personal choices are becoming a burden," one director said. "If this continues, investors will lose confidence." "My personal life doesn't affect the company's performance," Darius replied evenly. "It has," another interrupted. "That woman was just a distraction. It's over." The word woman rang louder than he intended. He kept his face neutral, but something was uneasy inside. Rosie waited anxiously outside the conference room until the door opened. A few executives quietly emerged, their faces stony. They avoided looking at her. And then Darius appeared behind them, his expression calm, his features unchanged, but tension hardening his jaw. He held her gaze for a second, just a second, and that was enough for her to understand. Something was very, very wrong. "Rosie," he said, his voice low, "come inside." The door closed behind them. The room was cold, dark, oppressively formal. Darius stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back, as if he were supporting the city skyline. "They want you to leave temporarily," he finally said. His voice didn't shake, but something inside him seemed to shatter. Rosie stared at him, stunned. "What?" "The board believes," he sighed, his jaw clenching. "They believe you're a distraction. A mistake." Her stomach twisted. "A mistake?" He didn't answer. Silence replaced him. Rosie felt the betrayal like a slow knife sliding across her ribs. So you want to suspend me? The paper on the desk confirmed it. Her name typed neatly, efficiently, impersonally. His signature at the bottom. Something inside her broke. You asked me to help you, she said softly, her words trembling but her eyes steady. And I did. I believe. Darius closed his eyes, as if the words hurt him more than her anger, but he said nothing. Rosie stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper sharper than a scream. Never. She let the meaning sink in. I never really mattered to you. Darius was startled. Just startled. But she understood. Her hands clenched as she picked up the suspension form. She didn't cry. Not here, not in front of him. She tried to keep her breathing even, her shoulders steady, her dignity intact. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hayes, she said, her tone formal, cold, even, without her realizing it. She walked to the door. She opened it. And without looking back, she walked out of his office, leaving only silence behind her. Inside, Darius stood motionless, moving. Outside, Rosie walked with a broken heart in her chest, but her back was straight, her steps unwavering. A month passed quietly, as if the world were falling apart. Rosie spent most of her time at home, nursing her mother back to health, filling out job applications, and pretending, mostly to herself, that she was perfectly healthy. She chopped vegetables, made tea, answered emails, and stayed away from the top right drawer of her desk, where the suspension letter signed by Darius Hayes still lay. Sometimes, when the phone rang, her heart raced. But it was never him. She told herself she had moved on, but the truth was simpler and gentler. She still hoped for a call. Meanwhile, across the river, the corner office of Hayes Enterprises was no longer the same. Darius worked later than before, arranging his schedule with the precision of a man who had lost the ability to rest. His staff noticed the change. He was less irritable, his silences longer, his gaze fixed on the empty desk outside the office. The desk where Rosie used to sit. More than once, he picked up the phone, typed her name, then deleted it. He told himself he didn't deserve her to pick up the phone if he called. One afternoon, while delivering groceries to her mother's room, Rosie paused when she heard the television. A news clip flashed on the screen. The Bennett Initiative, a new charitable program from the Hayes Group. Rosie froze. On the screen, a reporter explained the program's mission, a major charitable project to fund small businesses led by women. Her hands shook. She slumped in her chair. Why would he name anything after her? That evening, she opened the mailbox and found a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Her breath caught as she recognized the handwriting. Please come. 2 words. Handwritten. Only the signature. Darius. Rosie closed her eyes, not knowing if she was shaking with anger, with desire. Her heart was pounding. Maybe it was just a ritual, a guilty gesture, or maybe it was something else entirely. She told herself she wouldn't go. She had moved on. But the night of the gala party, she found herself standing before the mirror again, her hands shaking as she fastened the simple necklace she had worn. The dress was new this time, a modest but elegant silver. Emma was grinning as she zipped it up. He's trying to fix it, she whispered. Maybe, or maybe it's just another show, Rosie muttered. Then let him perform, her friend replied. As she entered the event hall, camera flashes illuminated the marble steps in white beams. She hesitated before entering, clutching her small clutch like she was wearing armor. Inside, the room was filled with chatter. The cacophony of power and wealth she had once immersed herself in was background noise. Nothing about her stood out, except the way people parted as she passed, whispering her name. On stage, Darius stepped onto the podium. The room fell silent. His eyes immediately found Rosie. Something rough flashed across his face before he spoke. This project was inspired by someone who taught me that true power doesn't need to be loud to be seen. It just needs to stand strong even when the world tries to shut it down. The guests turned to Rosie. Her pulse pounded. Darius continued, his voice soft but firm. Her integrity reminds me that leadership isn't about image or control. It's about compassion, about doing the right thing, even if it costs you everything. He paused, his voice low. I'd like to dedicate the Bennett Initiative to Rosie Bennett. Applause rang out, echoing throughout the hall. Rosie stood still, her breath caught between disbelief and pain that threatened to shatter. Tonight, Everything she'd tried to forget flashed before her eyes, in bright lights, in the voice of the man she'd once trusted. The applause from the ballroom still echoed faintly when Rosie stepped out to the quieter hallway. Her heart hadn't settled since the moment Darius spoke her name on that stage, clear, steady, reverent, as if it had always belonged beside his. Darius approached slowly, almost cautiously, as though afraid she might disappear again. In Taeon Lai Moti Fong Bi Trang, Duok Nim Kan Then. Rosie, he said, voice low but firm. This is for you. She accepted it with trembling fingers. Inside was a new contract, clean, crisp, bearing her name in bold letters. Rosie Bennett, Executive Director, the Bennett Initiative. Her breath caught. Darius looked straight into her, nothing guarded in his eyes this time. This isn't guilt, he said, and it isn't compensation. You inspired this project. You changed the way I lead and the way I see people, the way I see myself. Her lips parted, unsure if she should speak or simply breathe. I want you to take this role, he continued softly, because I trust you, because the world is better when you're part of building it. For the first time in weeks, something warm cracked open in her chest, not forgiveness yet, but something like possibility. She nodded once. Slowly. I'll think about it. Darius exhaled, relieved. That's all I ask. 2 weeks later, life found its rhythm again, quiet mornings, steady workdays. The world felt calmer, but her heart had not forgotten the shape of the storm. One chilly Thursday afternoon, the bell above her office door chimed. Rosie glanced up, expecting a client. But it was Darius, standing there in a charcoal coat, holding 2 takeout cups and looking almost human. He smiled, just a little. I was wondering if you'd have dinner with me tonight. No business. No pretending. Just us. Her pulse skipped. Are you sure that's wise? With everything that's happened? Probably not, he said simply. But I'm tired of being wise. Something in that honesty disarmed her. She grabbed her coat. The real dinner. They walked through the city lights like 2 people relearning each other's presence. At the small corner bistro, they talked for hours, about her mother's recovery, his childhood, the fears neither dared to voice before. At one point, Darius rested his hands on the table and said quietly, You made me slow down. You made me listen, and I didn't know how much I needed that. Rosie felt herself soften, piece by piece. The proposal. It was past midnight when they stepped outside. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the streetlights. Darius stopped, reached into his coat, and pulled out a simple silver ring. I figured, he said, voice shaking for the first time, since you helped me rebuild everything, you should have a share in all of it. He opened the box. Rosie's breath shuddered. Tears warmed her eyes as she whispered, Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she fell into his arms, laughing and crying all at once. Their love had not been born from luxury or pretense, but from something quieter, respect, truth, and the courage to see each other clearly. Rosie, once the ordinary secretary, had become the heart that gave power its meaning.